Now, my next guest is the prominent Nigerian-American human rights lawyer, Emmanuel Ogebe, who's been a vocal advocate for victims of attacks in Nigeria's Middle Belt region and beyond. As special counsel for the Justice for Jos project, Barrister Ogebe has documented mass atrocities and provided legal representation, mental health support and relocation services to survivors of religious and communal violence. His work has shed light on the plight of vulnerable groups in Nigeria, making him a key figure in the debate over President Trump's allegations of Christian genocide in the country. Mr. Ogebe's advocacy has contributed to significant policy outcomes, including the U.S. designation of Boko Haram as a foreign terrorist organization and the International Criminal Court's acknowledgement of the group's crimes against humanity. He's also worked tirelessly to raise awareness about the humanitarian crisis in Nigeria, pushing for intervention and accountability for perpetrators. So, as U.S.-Nigeria relations face increased tension, I'm joined now in the studio by the international human rights lawyer Emmanuel Ogebe, whose voice is important in addressing the complex issues surrounding religious violence, security, and human rights in Nigeria. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Always a pleasure, Charles.
I know you're just literally flying in, so we appreciate your coming in here with all the jet lag and all the rest of it that goes with it. Let me start by asking you this. President Trump recently designated Nigeria as a country of particular concern over alleged Christian persecution. Do you believe this designation is justified?
So, the designation is justified and has been justified for many years. The commission that does the recommendation started recommending, I think, in 2009. So for about 15 years they've been recommending, and it's only happened twice. Now, some of us thought it should have happened way earlier. And the law was passed in '98. It was one of the first bills I advocated on the Hill for. And by the year 2000, we had the Sharia riots in northern Nigeria that killed 3,000 Christians across 4 states. And so at that time, they should have recommended Nigeria for designation. But what happened was, because it was a new law, new agency, all of that, the delegation that was doing the fact-finding came, they met with northern governors, and they hadn't met anyone from the federal government. So it wasn't till I facilitated that meeting, and the federal government said, look, it's the states that are doing this, it's not us. So they decided not to designate the states for that.
You are, of course, an internationally recognized human rights lawyer who has represented victims of attacks across Nigeria, including the Middle Belt. How challenging would you say this issue of alleged Christian genocide is for you as you straddle the fence between the U.S. and Nigeria?
So, I mean, it's very depressing work, because I have to say that when we were advocating for democracy against the military in the 90s, those of us in the opposition in diaspora said, look, let's downgrade all our mini fights, all the Middle Belt Ogoni issue, let's focus on getting the military out. Once they're out, democracy will resolve our problems. Unfortunately, none of us would have anticipated that Nigerians would be dying in droves like they are now. And two very quick examples that illustrate this. The first is, on June 13th, there was a massacre in Yelwata. And the number of people killed that night, 278, was more than the people killed in the war between Iran and Israel, in which missiles and airplanes were used. So people with machetes and AK-47s killed more people by June 8th. Another quick example, of course, is in Plateau State. On Palm Sunday, there was a massacre in Ukraine. Russia bombed the bus and killed 32 people, civilians. That is being investigated as a war crime by the ICC. But guess what? That same night, 54 people were slaughtered in ZK Plateau State. One of the women that were helping, 7 members of her family killed, including her husband and her kids. And her hand was slashed off. We just got her a prosthetic arm. But that is what genocide looks like.
Yeah, but is it were they being killed because they were Christians, or was this communal violence?
All right, so
and just as an adjunct to that question, are you also aware of the fact that a lot of Muslims are being killed in Nigeria?
No, there's no doubt that there is collateral damage, but the fact of the matter is, in the US, a couple of weeks ago, a National Guardswoman was shot in the head by a guy screaming, "God is great," in Arabic. The people who killed Alice's family were screaming, "God is great." You cannot look at both situations and say religion was not a factor. And so it's very clear. These folks are very systematic because they look at the communities that they are certain fall within a certain identity, and they target them. Now, I'm from Benue State, which is over 90% Christian. We don't have indigenous Fulani communities. So the attackers coming from other states and other countries and attack and kill us.
Yeah, but there's the argument that a lot of them come in are driven by other factors other than religion. In other words, the point that is being made is that nobody is denying that there's killing taking place, but that the factors that make these attacks, that drive these attacks, is not really, they're not going to say, okay, let's go and attack Christian communities or whatever. They just say, well, there's land over there, we want that land, we're going to get rid of whoever is in it and take over that space.
Well, it doesn't quite work out that way. The message is, let's go and take out the infidels. So from the very beginning, there is a religious connotation. I think on your show some time ago, I told the story of how the spouse of a judge hired a Fulani to take care of his cattle. And then one day the man came back and said, "I nearly killed an idiot infidel today." And he said, "Why?" He said, "I was grazing the cow on his farm and he was resisting." And the spouse of the judge panicked and said, "I can't have my agent killing people because that's effectively me." And so he fired the Fulani guy. The next Fulani guy he hired disappeared with his cattle. He got the police involved, and at a point, people told him, "Listen, if you don't let this guy go away with it, he'll come after you." And so he gave up on that. After your show, I ran into the spouse of the Supreme Court Justice, and he said, "I heard that story, and it sounded like my story." I said, "My Lord, it was yours."
Right.
So we're saying that judicial officers are frustrated because of the impunity of these people.
So based on what you're saying, I'm assuming you're one of those who's been highlighting this issue as a specific Christian genocide in America where you operate from.
I think that the facts are clear, they're established, and there's no doubt. For example, Mohammed Yusuf.
When you say the facts are clear, established by whom? Because there's still fact-finding missions taking place.
Well, there was a process that led up to the FTO designation of Boko Haram. I did a 75-page brief. We showed how Boko Haram had killed citizens of 15 countries. People don't realize the extent to which it went. Boko Haram has attacked American citizens. My friend was in the UN building that was bombed. An FBI agent working at the US Embassy in Abuja was bombed in the police headquarters bombing. So this have all happened. Americans have been abducted by Fulani headsmen, and special forces have come in to Nigeria and rescued them covertly. And this is not known publicly. So they have access to way more information than we have. But the point I was going to make was that Mohammed Yusuf preached, and he said, "Listen, you were wiping out the infidels." He said, Yaradua flew me on a presidential jet and begged me to stop killing the infidels, and I'm not going to do it. These have been transcribed. We have the videos. We've transcribed them. We've handed them around. And in fact, I think some of them were presented to the delegation today. So there's no doubt that there are certain people who are conducting genocide. And that's Boko Haram. Let me go to the Fulanis, the Fulani ethnic militia, FEMAs they're called. One of their hallmarks of their atrocities is if they meet a pregnant woman on a farm, they will slaughter her. But then they will split open her abdomen, pull out the fetus, and butcher it. It doesn't get more graphic than that. Now, there are some who say they want to instill terror on whoever comes to the scene afterwards. But I say, attacking the fetus, you're trying to eliminate and end these people. And to conclude on this thought, there are over 300 communities in Middle Belt of Nigeria now that have been sacked and are occupied by Fulani ethnic militia. And I can't point to one Fulani village that has been occupied.
Right. I have to say that bit about cutting open a woman's stomach, I haven't actually heard that before.
Yeah.
But, and I don't know, I haven't seen any evidence to support that. But I mean, if you know, that's the point that you believe. I mean, do you say that, do you think, for example, or how would you react when critics say to you that by highlighting these, I have to say, alleged atrocities against Christian groups specifically in Nigeria, that you might be perceived as fueling religious tensions in this country?
Well, the people who are fueling religious tensions are the people who are killing others and chanting the name of God and the greatness of God. Okay? And so basically what we're seeing is...
But there are revenge attacks, though. I mean, that there are attacks from the other side against the other side, aren't there?
Well, we keep hearing that there are clashes. And excuse me, when you come into a community and you kill a 3-year and a 4-year-old, a 3 and a 4-year-old cannot clash with you. When you attack me in my home as I'm sleeping and you burn me alive with my family, that was not a clash. We keep missing the point that these are invaders who are coming in and wiping out people on their ancestral lines. It's not a clash.
Well, I mean, you're a lawyer, and I'm not trying to justify before people start going, "Oh, he's blah blah." We don't take sides. We're simply trying to assess the evidence before us. I mean, if because we've heard of people who say, "Oh, some of these Fulani herdsmen were seen somewhere," and the youths of a village mobilized and went and killed, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 of them, and then these people come back and kill 20, 30, 40 of your own. I mean, nobody's sort of sitting there saying, well, we killed 5, so technically you ought to kill 5 as well. You see what I mean? Well, what it is, basically, is that if you hit me with a stick, in order to stop you coming back to hit me again, I'm going to hit you with a sledgehammer. I mean, and I'm saying that it works both ways. You see what I mean? That's why people say that this is a very, very complicated affair, very complex affair, that even a lot of Nigerians themselves don't quite get their heads around it, not to talk of the Americans who are not part of this society.
Well, fortunately, they can look at the data and it's pretty clear, what is happening. I'll give a quick example. In June of 2018, there was a massacre in Plateau State. That weekend, over 200 people were slaughtered. Now, in one particular village, 86 people were killed. There was only one Muslim who was killed. And why he was killed was they didn't identify him as a Muslim. He died as collateral damage. Well, here's where it gets interesting. A Muslim cleric hid 300 Christians in his mosque, and he refused to allow the attackers to kill them. And he has been hailed as a hero. And at that time, the US government was denying that it was a religious thing. But the fact remains that he saved 300 Christians in his mosque. That was the protection. So we can't deny the obvious. And just to wrap up on that, the International Criminal Court, I did a lot of work with the International Criminal Court to get them to even begin investigating Boko Haram. I went to them, I sat down with the prosecutors, I said, the Boko Haram blew up the UN building, your fellow UN civil servants. Why are you not looking into that? It's amazing some of the lapses we've seen. And after they investigated, they finally indicted not only Boko Haram, but the Nigerian army for atrocities. They have indictments as we speak. It is a lack of political will to proceed. That's why it hasn't happened.
So how do you think the US government can balance its concerns about religious freedom with the need to support Nigeria's efforts to address security challenges in this country?
Now, so let me point out that the US and Nigeria have had amazing historic relationships. And if we just look at, the last 25 years of democracy, I kid you not, this is what happened. President Obasanjo, incidentally, is the only Nigerian president who was first to host an American president in the US, in Nigeria, and also the last to host one, because he hosted Jimmy Carter and ultimately he hosted Clinton and Bush. Now, here is what is interesting. When 9/11 happened, Obasanjo was so close to Bush that he flew to the US, sat side by side with him, and told them, "We will send you 3,000 Nigerian firefighters to help you." Nigeria was trying to help the US. Now, this is interesting because when Obasanjo and Clinton had a good relationship and Bush took over, Obasanjo was concerned when Bush invited him. I happened to be in the country, I happened to meet him. That was my first time meeting him. And I said to him, "Mr. President," he said, "I'm worried. I don't know why this guy invited me." I said, "You have nothing to worry about. You have more in common with this guy than you realize." And what had happened was Bush wanted to do a hallmark activity with an African president on HIV/AIDS. They wanted to go to South Africa, but the president then was controversial. But Obasanjo had hosted a summit on HIV/AIDS. And they said, "This is a guy we can work with." That's how the Americans are. They study things. Now, right now, we're at a point where there's a real drift. As recently as 2 years ago, the US wanted Tinubu to invade Niger and kick out the coupists, and that didn't fly. And so this year, they're at a point where they're saying, if you will not protect your own people from being killed, we'll go ahead and do it ourselves.
Well, that brings me, because we've literally got a minute and a half or so left. I'm sure you know that we talked about this US Congressional fact-finding mission that's been visiting Nigeria, meeting the federal government, Christian leaders, victims. Congressman Riley Moore appears to be a fundamentalist Christian, because, I mean, in all his tweets and so on, he's going on about this, that, or the other thing, and a big critic of the Nigerian government's handling of this issue of alleged Christian genocide. I mean, he's the one leading the group. Do you think they're here with an open mind, or are their minds already made up?
Well, the thing is, in fairness to the Republicans, they're a bit more honest about their assessments than the Democrats do. The Democrats just deny. But I noticed that he came here with a Gulfstream jet. The congressional delegations that have come to Nigeria before usually come commercial. But that shows you how serious this is on the totem pole if the president allowed him to take a jet to come to Nigeria and do this fact-finding. So I think they really took it seriously, and I think that the evidence will speak for itself.
Emmanuel, I want to thank you very much indeed. It's really good to have you here. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. Emmanuel Ogebe is the international human rights lawyer, and he's just literally arrived in the country. Thank you very much indeed. Good to see you.
Thanks, Charles.
That's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Join us again tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja, bye-bye, and thank you for watching.